I always thought I knew every inch of my hometown. The cracked sidewalks, the faded murals on Main Street, the way the old water tower creaked in the wind, these were the details that made up the background of my life. I could have walked those streets blindfolded and still found my way home. But nothing could have prepared me for the morning I woke up and found the entire town gone. Not just empty, gone. No people, no cars, not even the distant hum of a lawnmower or the bark of a neighbor's dog. Just silence, thick and absolute, pressing in on all sides. That IT started like any other day. My alarm buzzed at 6:30, and I rolled out of bed, groggy and half dreaming. I remember thinking it was unusually quiet, but I chalked it up to the weather. Sometimes, when the fog rolled in from the river, the whole town felt muffled, like someone had thrown a heavy blanket over everything. I brushed my teeth, pulled on a hoodie, and padded downstairs, expecting to find my mom in the kitchen, humming along to the radio while she made coffee. But the kitchen was empty. The coffee pot was cold. The radio was silent. I called out, "Mom." My voice sounded strange in the stillness, too loud, like it didn't belong. No answer. I checked her bedroom, the bathroom, even the backyard. Nothing. Her car was still in the driveway, keys on the hook by the door. I tried her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. That was when the first sliver of unease crept in. I told myself she'd probably gone for a walk, maybe to clear her head. She did that sometimes, especially when she couldn't sleep. But the feeling wouldn't go away. I decided to check on my neighbors. The Johnsons lived next door, and their house was usually a hive of activity in the mornings, kids running around, Mr. Johnson cursing at the newspaper, Mrs. Johnson yelling at the dog. But their house was silent, too. I rang the bell, knocked, even tried the door. It was unlocked, but the inside was empty. Breakfast dishes sat on the table, half-eaten toast, and a glass of orange juice sweating in the morning light. The TV was on, but the screen was just static. I went from house to house, street to street. Every door was unlocked, every house empty. It was like everyone had just stopped, left in the middle of whatever they were doing. Lawnmowers sat abandoned on front lawns, cars idled at green lights, sprinklers sprayed water onto empty driveways. I found a stroller tipped over on the sidewalk, a child's shoe lying next to it. The playground at the park was deserted, swings creaking in the breeze. I called out, shouted, even screamed. No one answered. I tried calling 911, but my phone wouldn't connect. No signal, no bars, nothing. I tried the landline at the Johnsons' house, but all I got was a high-pitched whine. I turned on the TV, flipped through the channels, static, static, static. The internet was down, too. It was like the whole world had gone offline. I started to panic. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I ran back to my house, locked the doors, and sat on the floor, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was it some kind of evacuation? A gas leak? A chemical spill? But if that were the case, why hadn't anyone woken me up? Why was I the only one left? I forced myself to calm down, to think logically. I needed to find out if anyone else was still here. I grabbed my bike and rode to the police station. The front doors were wide open, lights on, but the place was deserted. Desks were covered in paperwork, half-finished cups of coffee, a radio crackling with static. I checked the holding cells, the evidence room, even the chief's office. Nothing. I tried the fire station, the hospital, the grocery store. All empty. I started to notice other things, too. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The sky was a strange, washed-out gray, the sun a pale disk behind the clouds. There were no birds, no insects, not even the distant rumble of traffic from the highway. It was as if the world had been put on pause, everything frozen in place except for me. I rode out to the edge of town, past the old mill and the abandoned train tracks. The road was empty, stretching out into the distance. I thought about leaving, about driving until I found someone, anyone. But something held me back. A feeling, deep in my gut, that whatever had happened here wasn't finished. That if I left, I might never find my way back. I spent the rest of the day searching. I checked every house, every store, every alley and back road. I found signs of life everywhere: fresh coffee, warm food, a TV still playing a cartoon in an empty living room. But no people. It was like they had all vanished at the exact same moment, leaving everything behind. As the sun began to set, the shadows grew longer, and the silence felt even heavier. I made my way back home, exhausted and scared. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw empty streets, abandoned cars, the faces of people I knew frozen in my memory. That night, I dreamed of the town as it used to be, alive, bustling, full of laughter and noise. I saw my friends at the diner, my mom at the farmer's market, the Johnson kids playing tag in the yard. But even in my dream, I knew it wasn't real. I woke up in the middle of the night, heart racing, drenched in sweat. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay inside any longer. I needed answers. I packed a backpack with food, water, a flashlight, and my dad's old baseball bat, just in case. I set out on foot, determined to find some clue, some sign of what had happened. I started at the town square, the heart of our community. The fountain was still running, water splashing into the basin. The benches were empty, the flower beds overgrown. I checked the library, the post office, the old movie theater. All empty. I found a newspaper on the steps of the town hall, the dates circled in red. Yesterday, the headline read, "Local festival promises biggest turnout yet." I remembered the festival, how everyone had been looking forward to it, how the whole town had been buzzing with excitement. But there was no sign of the festival now. No tents, no banners, no crowds. I wandered through the streets, searching for anything out of place. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were everywhere, on the sidewalks, in the mud by the river, even on the roofs of some buildings. But they weren't normal footprints. They were too large, too deep, with strange, elongated toes. Some of them were smeared, as if whatever had made them had been dragging something behind it. I followed the footprints, my heart pounding in my chest. They led me through the park, past the playground, and into the woods at the edge of town. The trees were thick, the undergrowth tangled. I pushed my way through, branches scratching at my arms, the air growing colder with every step. The footprints led to a clearing, and in the center of the clearing was a circle of stones. The ground inside the circle was scorched, blackened as if by fire. In the center of the circle was a single, charred object. I approached cautiously, my hands shaking. It was a cell phone, melted and twisted, the screen shattered. I picked it up, hoping for some clue, but it was dead. I searched the clearing, looking for anything else. That's when I heard it, a low, rumbling sound, like distant thunder. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and the air grew colder still. I spun around, searching for the source of the noise, but the woods were empty. Suddenly, the sky darkened, clouds swirling overhead. The wind picked up, whipping the trees into a frenzy. I stumbled back, tripping over a root, and landed hard on the ground. The rumbling grew louder, closer, until it felt like the earth itself was shaking. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. The wind died, the sky cleared, and the silence returned. I lay there for a moment, heart pounding, trying to catch my breath. When I finally stood up, I noticed something new, a symbol burned into the ground inside the circle of stones. It was a spiral, twisting inward, the edges still smoking. I stared at the symbol, trying to make sense of it. It felt ancient, powerful, like it didn't belong in this world. I reached out to touch it, but the ground was still hot, and I jerked my hand back. I left the clearing, my mind racing with questions. What had happened here? What did the symbol mean? And most importantly, where was everyone? I made my way back to town, following the strange footprints. As I walked, I noticed more signs, scratches on tree trunks, broken branches, patches of scorched earth. It was as if something had swept through the town, leaving destruction in its wake. Back in town, I checked the school, the gym, the community center. All empty. I found a notebook in the principal's office. The last entry dated the day before. It read, "Festival preparations going well. Everyone excited. Strange noises last night. Kids say it's just the wind. Hope they're right." I sat in the empty office, reading the words over and over. Strange noises. Had anyone else noticed? Had anyone tried to leave? I decided to check the town's security cameras. The police station had a small room filled with monitors, each one showing a different part of town. Most of the screens were dark, but a few still flickered with grainy footage. I rewound the tapes, searching for anything unusual. At first, everything looked normal, people going about their day, kids playing, cars driving by. But then, just after midnight, the footage changed. The streets emptied, the lights flickered, and a thick fog rolled in, swallowing everything in its path. Shadows moved through the mist, tall and thin, gliding silently across the pavement. The cameras glitched, the images distorting, and then nothing. Just static. I watched the footage again and again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shadows didn't look human. They moved too quickly, too smoothly, their limbs bending at impossible angles. I felt a chill run down my spine. I spent the rest of the day searching for more clues. I checked the library's archives, the town's historical records, even the old church at the edge of town. I found references to strange events in the past, disappearances, unexplained fires, stories of creatures in the woods. But nothing like this. Nothing on this scale. As night fell, I returned home, exhausted and no closer to understanding what had happened. I sat in the dark, listening to the silence, wondering if I was truly alone. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping at the window. I froze, heart pounding, every muscle tensed. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I crept to the window, peering through the curtains. There was nothing there, just darkness. I closed the curtains, locked the doors, and tried to sleep. But the tapping continued, echoing through the empty house, a reminder that I was not as alone as I thought, that I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tapping, sometimes at the window, sometimes at the door, sometimes from somewhere deeper in the house. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, a branch scraping against the siding, maybe a loose shutter. But the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic, like someone or something was trying to get my attention. By dawn, the tapping had stopped, but the sense of unease lingered. I forced myself to eat a granola bar, washed it down with lukewarm water, and tried to plan my next move. I couldn't keep wandering the empty town, hoping for answers to fall into my lap. I needed a new approach. I decided to make a map. I gathered every scrap of paper I could find, old receipts, napkins, the back of a takeout menu, and started sketching out the town from memory. I marked every place I'd searched, every clue I'd found, every strange footprint or scorched patch of earth. I circled the clearing in the woods, the symbol burned into the ground, the places where the security cameras had glitched. As I worked, a pattern began to emerge, a spiral, winding through the town, touching every place where something strange had happened. I stared at the map, heart pounding. The spiral matched the symbol I'd found in the clearing. It was as if the entire town had been caught in its grip, drawn inward towards some unknown center. I wondered if that was where everyone had gone, drawn into the heart of the spiral, vanished without a trace. I decided to follow the spiral, to see where it led. I packed my bag with more supplies, canned food, a bottle of water, a flashlight with fresh batteries, a pocket knife, and a notebook. I slipped my dad's old baseball bat through the straps of my backpack, just in case. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and stepped out into the empty street. The morning was eerily still. The sky was a flat, featureless gray, the air heavy and damp. I walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. I followed the path I'd traced on my map, moving from one marked spot to the next. At each location, I paused, searching for anything I might have missed. At the playground, I found a child's backpack, unzipped and half empty, lying in the sand beneath the slide. Inside was a crumpled drawing, a stick-figure family standing in front of a house, a swirling black shape looming in the sky above them. I shivered and tucked the drawing into my notebook. At the grocery store, I found a shopping cart abandoned in the parking lot, groceries still inside. A carton of eggs had cracked open, the yolks congealed in the morning sun. On the ground beside the cart was a receipt, the last item circled in red, spiral pasta. I almost laughed at the coincidence, but the sound died in my throat. At the old church, I found the doors wide open, the pews empty. Candles burned on the altar, their flames steady and bright. On the wall behind the altar, someone had painted a spiral in thick, black strokes. The paint was still wet. I moved on, following the spiral deeper into town. The footprints grew more frequent, the signs of struggle more obvious. Broken windows, overturned furniture, doors hanging from their hinges. It was as if the town had been swept up in a storm, everything tossed aside in its wake. As I walked, I began to notice something else, a faint humming, just at the edge of hearing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a low, vibrating sound that set my teeth on edge. I tried to ignore it, but the further I walked, the louder it grew. The spiral led me to the high school, the largest building in town. The front doors were propped open, the hallways dark and silent. I stepped inside, the humming growing louder, vibrating through the floor and up into my bones. I moved cautiously, flashlight in hand, checking each classroom as I passed. Desks were scattered, papers littered the floor, lockers hung open. In the gym, I found a pile of shoes and backpacks, as if the students had all vanished in the middle of gym class. The scoreboard flickered, stuck on midnight. I made my way to the auditorium, the source of the humming. The doors were closed, but light leaked out from beneath them, pulsing in time with the sound. I hesitated, heart pounding, then pushed the doors open. The auditorium was empty, but the stage was lit by a single spotlight. In the center of the stage was a chair, and on the chair sat a tape recorder, its reels spinning. The humming was coming from the speakers, a low, droning sound that seemed to vibrate the air itself. That I approached cautiously, reached out, and pressed stop. The humming ceased, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I rewound the tape, pressed play, and listened. At first, all I heard was static. Then, faintly, a voice, distorted, barely audible. If anyone hears this, don't follow the spiral. Don't look at the center. They're watching. They're always watching. The tape ended in a burst of static. I rewound it, played it again, but the message was the same. I sat in the empty auditorium, the words echoing in my mind. Don't follow the spiral. Don't look at the center. They're watching. I left the school, shaken but more determined than ever. I had to know what was at the center of the spiral. I had to know what had happened to my town. I followed the spiral out of town, past the last row of houses, down a narrow dirt road that wound through the fields. The humming returned, louder now, almost deafening. The air grew colder, the sky darker, as if night were falling in the middle of the day. The road ended at an old farmhouse, its windows boarded up, the paint peeling from the walls. The spiral was painted on the front door, black and glistening. I hesitated, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark, the air thick with dust. I moved from room to room, searching for any sign of life. In the kitchen, I found a table set for dinner, plates of food untouched, glasses half full. In the living room, a fire smoldered in the hearth, the embers glowing faintly. I climbed the stairs, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. At the end of the hallway was a door, slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a mirror hanging on the far wall. The spiral was etched into the glass, twisting inward, drawing my gaze. I tried to look away, but my eyes were drawn to the center, to the darkness that seemed to pulse and writhe within the glass. As I stared, the humming grew louder, filling my head, drowning out all other thoughts. The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in. I felt myself being pulled forward, drawn into the spiral, into the darkness at its heart. I tore my eyes away, stumbled back, and fell to the floor. The humming stopped. The room returned to silence. I lay there, gasping for breath, my heart racing. I scrambled to my feet, backed out of the room, and slammed the door behind me. I ran down the stairs, out of the house, and into the cold, gray light of day. That I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of town. I collapsed on the sidewalk, shaking, my mind reeling. I knew now that the spiral was more than just a symbol. It was a force, a presence, something ancient and hungry. It had taken my town, drawn everyone into its center, and left me behind. I spent the next few days searching for answers. I scoured the library, the town archives, every book and newspaper I could find. I found stories of other towns, other places where people had vanished overnight, leaving only spirals behind. Some called it a curse, others a disease, still others a punishment from the gods. But no one knew for sure. I tried to leave town, to drive as far as I could, but every road led me back to the same place. The spiral was everywhere, painted on signs, carved into trees, burned into the grass. It was as if the town itself was alive, reshaping itself around me, keeping me trapped. I began to lose track of time. Days blurred into nights, nights into days. I wandered the empty streets, searching for any sign of life. Sometimes I thought I saw a movement in the shadows, a flicker of motion, a glimpse of a face in a window. But when I looked closer, there was nothing there. That I started to hear voices, faint and distant, calling my name. Sometimes they sounded like my mom, sometimes like my friends, sometimes like strangers. I tried to follow them, but they always led me in circles, back to the center of the spiral. That I began to write everything down, filling notebook after notebook with my observations, my theories, my fears. I mapped the spiral again and again, trying to find a way out, a way to break the pattern. But the more I wrote, the more the spiral seemed to tighten around me, drawing me closer to its center. One night, I dreamed of the clearing in the woods, the circle of stones, the symbol burned into the ground. In my dream, I saw the townspeople standing in the circle, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They chanted in unison, their voices rising and falling in time with the humming. At the center of the circle stood a figure, tall and thin, its face hidden in shadow. It raised its arms, and the spiral began to spin, faster and faster, until everything was swallowed by darkness. I woke with a start, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I knew what I had to do. I had to return to the clearing, to the center of the spiral. I had to face whatever was waiting there. I packed my bag one last time, checked my map, and set out into the woods. The air was colder than before, the sky darker. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like fingers. I pushed forward, following the path of the spiral, my flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the gloom. The clearing was just as I remembered it, circle of stones, scorched earth, spiral burned into the ground. But this time, I wasn't alone. Figures stood in the shadows, their faces hidden, their bodies still. They watched me in silence, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. I recognized some of them, my mom, the Johnsons, my friends from school. They stood motionless, as if waiting for something. At the center of the circle stood the figure from my dream, tall and thin, its face still hidden in shadow. It raised its arms, and the humming began again, low and deep, vibrating through the ground. I stepped into the circle, my heart pounding. The figures closed in around me, their eyes fixed on the spiral at my feet. The humming grew louder, the air thick with tension. The figure spoke, its voice a whisper that echoed in my mind. You have come to the center. You have seen the spiral. Now you must choose, join us, or be alone forever. I looked around at the faces of my friends, my family, the people I had known all my life. Their eyes were empty, their expressions blank. I felt a surge of fear, of anger, of desperation. I won't join you, I said, my voice shaking. I won't be part of this. The figure tilted its head, considering me. The humming grew louder. The spiral at my feet began to spin, faster and faster. Then you will be alone, the figure said. Forever. The world spun around me, the darkness closing in. I felt myself being pulled into the spiral, into the center, into the void. And then, nothing. I woke up on the floor of my bedroom, the morning sun streaming through the window. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But when I looked outside, the town was still empty, the streets still silent, the spiral still burned into the grass. That I was alone. The days that followed blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the last. I wandered the empty streets, haunted by the memory of the spiral, the figure in the clearing, and the faces of my friends and family, so close, yet impossibly distant. The silence pressed in on me, a weight that grew heavier with every passing hour. I tried to keep busy, to distract myself with small tasks, organizing the pantry, sweeping the porch, fixing a leaky faucet, but nothing could shake the sense of isolation that had settled over me like a shroud. I began to notice changes in the town. The grass grew taller, untamed, swallowing sidewalks and driveways. Weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement, reclaiming the roads. The paint on houses peeled and flaked, colors fading under the relentless gray sky. The world was decaying, slowly but surely, as if the absence of people had allowed nature to creep back in, erasing all traces of human life. But it wasn't just the physical world that was changing. I started to see things, shapes moving in the corners of my vision, shadows that flickered and danced just beyond the reach of the light. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the product of too many sleepless nights and too much time spent alone. But the more I tried to ignore them, the more persistent they became. One evening, as I sat on the front steps of my house, I saw a figure standing at the end of the street. It was tall and thin, its features obscured by the gathering dusk. I watched it for a long time, waiting for it to move, to reveal itself. But it just stood there, motionless, watching me. When I finally mustered the courage to approach, it melted away into the shadows, leaving me alone once more. I started to keep a journal, recording everything I saw and heard, every strange occurrence, every fleeting glimpse of movement. I wrote down my dreams, too, vivid, unsettling visions of spirals and darkness, of voices calling to me from the void. The act of writing gave me a sense of purpose, a way to impose order on the chaos that threatened to consume me. One night, I dreamed I was back in the clearing, surrounded by the townspeople. They stood in a circle, their eyes fixed on me, their mouths moving in silent prayer. The figure at the center raised its arms, and the spiral began to spin, faster and faster, until it became a vortex, pulling everything into its depths. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The darkness closed in, swallowing me whole. I woke with a start, gasping for breath, my heart racing. The room was cold, the air thick with the scent of rain. I listened for the tapping at the window, the humming in the walls, but all I heard was the steady drip of water from the leaky faucet in the kitchen. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to find a way out, a way to break the spiral's hold on the town and on me. I decided to retrace my steps, to revisit every place where I'd found a clue, every spot where the spiral had left its mark. Maybe I'd missed something, some detail that would point the way forward. I started at the playground, where I'd found the child's drawing. I studied the picture again, tracing the lines of the swirling shape in the sky. It looked almost like a storm, a black hole sucking everything into its center. I wondered if the child had seen something, sensed the danger before it arrived. Next, I went to the church, where the spiral had been painted on the wall behind the altar. The paint had dried, but the symbol seemed to pulse with a life of its own, drawing my gaze. I knelt at the altar, closed my eyes, and tried to remember the words from the tape recorder. Don't follow the spiral. Don't look at the center. They're watching. But I had already looked. I had already followed at the high school. I found the tape recorder still sitting on the stage, the reels motionless. I pressed play, but the tape was blank now, just static, the message erased. I searched the auditorium, the classrooms, the gym, but found nothing new. The spiral was tightening, its grip growing stronger. I returned to the farmhouse at the edge of town, the place where I'd first seen the spiral etched into the mirror. The house was colder than before, the air thick with dust and decay. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The door to the room with the mirror was closed. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The mirror was gone. In its place was a window, the glass fogged with condensation. I wiped it clean and looked out. The clearing in the woods was visible in the distance, the circle of stones still intact. But something was different. A faint light glowed at the center of the circle, pulsing in time with the beating of my heart. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to return to the clearing one last time. I waited until nightfall, then packed my bag with supplies, flashlight, notebook, water, the child's drawing, the pocket knife. I left a note on the kitchen table, just in case. If anyone finds this, I went to the clearing. I have to know. The walk through the woods was longer than I remembered. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like arms. The air was thick with mist, the ground soft and yielding beneath my feet. I followed the path of the spiral, my flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the darkness. When I reached the clearing, I saw that the circle of stones was glowing, the light at its center brighter now, almost blinding. The air hummed with energy, the ground vibrating beneath my feet. I stepped into the circle, my heart pounding. The light pulsed, and the humming grew louder. Shadows moved at the edge of the clearing, flickering and shifting, their forms indistinct. I felt a presence, vast and ancient, watching me from the darkness. That I knelt at the center of the circle, placed the child's drawing on the ground, and closed my eyes. I focused on the spiral, on the pattern that had haunted me since the day the town vanished. I tried to remember every detail, the footprints, the symbols, the voices, the dreams. The humming reached a crescendo, and the light flared, blinding me. I felt myself lifted off the ground, weightless, suspended in the heart of the spiral. Images flashed before my eyes, faces, places, moments from my life, all spinning around me in a dizzying whirl. I saw my mom, smiling at me from the kitchen table. I saw my friends, laughing at the diner. I saw the Johnson kids playing in the yard, the old water tower creaking in the wind. I saw the figure from the clearing, its face still hidden in shadow. The figure spoke, its voice echoing in my mind. You are the last. The spiral is complete. The choice is yours. Remain alone, or join us in the center. I felt the pull of the spiral, the promise of reunion, of belonging. I longed to see my family, my friends, to escape the crushing loneliness that had consumed me. But I remembered the warning. Don't follow the spiral. Don't look at the center. They're watching. I forced myself to look away, to break the pattern. I focused on the child's drawing, on the swirling shape in the sky. I realized, in that moment, that the spiral was not just a symbol of destruction. It was a cycle, a pattern that could be broken. I reached into my bag, pulled out the notebook, and began to write. I wrote my name, the date, the story of what had happened to the town. I wrote about the spiral, the figure, the choice I faced. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the light began to fade. As I wrote, the humming softened, the light dimmed. The pull of the spiral weakened, and I felt myself sinking back to the ground. The shadows at the edge of the clearing receded, the presence faded. I opened my eyes. The clearing was empty, the circle of stones cold and dark. The child's drawing lay at my feet, the spiral erased, replaced by a simple sun rising over the town. I stood, my legs trembling, and looked around. The woods were silent, the air still. I made my way back to town, the path clearer now, the trees less menacing. When I reached the edge of town, I saw lights in the windows, heard the distant sound of laughter, the bark of a dog, the hum of a lawnmower. The world was waking up, the spiral broken. I ran to my house, flung open the door, and found my mom in the kitchen, humming along to the radio as she made coffee. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Good morning," she said, smiling. "You're up early." I stared at her, unable to speak. Tears filled my eyes, and I rushed to hug her, holding on as if I'd never let go. The town was alive again. The people returned, the world restored. But I knew, deep down, that something had changed. The spiral was gone, but its memory lingered, a shadow at the edge of my mind. I kept the notebook, the child's drawing, the map I'd made. I told no one what had happened, afraid they'd think I was crazy. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faintest hint of humming, see a flicker of movement in the shadows. I remember the choice I made, the pattern I broke, and I wonder, if the spiral ever returns, will I be ready? I walk the streets of my town now with new eyes, noticing the small details I once took for granted. The way the sunlight glints off the water tower, the laughter of children at the playground, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. I cherish every moment, knowing how easily it can all be taken away. Sometimes, I visit the clearing in the woods, just to be sure. The circle of stones is still there, but the ground inside is green and lush, wildflowers blooming where the spiral once burned. I sit in the grass, listening to the wind in the trees, grateful for the second chance I've been given. I don't know why I was spared, why I was chosen to remember. Maybe it was luck, or fate, or something else entirely. But I do know this, the spiral is not invincible. Patterns can be broken, cycles can end. All it takes is the courage to choose a different path, to write a new story. If you ever find yourself alone, caught in a pattern you can't escape, remember my story. Remember the spiral and the choice I made. Don't be afraid to break the cycle, to step out of the pattern, to find your own way, because sometimes the only way to save yourself and the people you love is to refuse to follow the spiral, no matter how strong its pull. And if you ever wake up to find your town vanished, your world turned upside down, don't give in to fear. Search for the clues, trust your instincts, and never stop fighting for the truth. The answers are out there, waiting to be found. This is what I discovered when my entire town vanished overnight. This is what I found at the heart of the spiral. And this is the story I leave behind, in case it ever happens again.